Muito boa tarde a todos e muito obrigado por terem vindo. Como sabem, a missão da Universidade Europeia é criar profissionais globais e, por isso, nós temos vários convidados de outras universidades europeias e de outros países da América do Sul, da América do Norte e da Ásia para virem partilhar a sua experiência com os nossos alunos de doutoramento. Hoje temos um caso muito especial, de uma atividade, que já foi professor 6 anos aqui em Portugal na Faculdade de Economia da Nova e que depois foi para a COPENHAGEN School, que é uma das melhores escolas da Europa. E na COPENHAGEN School, o professor STEFAN, que é o nosso convidado hoje, foi pioneiro na implementação de métodos de ensino com base em métodos de estudo, onde os alunos estão no estudo e a trabalhar em projetos, são os professores que vão lá ajudá-los a desenvolver os trabalhos. Se me permite, passo para inglês. So, thank you very much, Stefan, for joining us this afternoon. And I'll leave you to your talk on design life innovation. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jerome. Welcome to all of you. So, if somebody says that you have been 6 years in a country, right, so I should be actually absolutely perfectly fine and able to deliver this talk in Portuguese, which I'm not, unfortunately. I understand most, and I can get through the everyday, I suppose, but for something like this, it's unfortunately never got up to the right and necessary level. And as João Wright said, I've created something which is a studio at CBS, and also I'm the coordinator of a master in innovation and entrepreneurship. And interestingly, that master program runs to 50% in the studio as well. So students have lectures, just like what I do now here, standing in front, somebody presenting an issue, but then at this, parallel to this, they have projects where they develop new products and services, projects where they find out how they can use the digital environment in which we live today for the advantages of innovation and entrepreneurship, projects on leading small teams, finding out how to make the most out of the human capital that you have in your group. And while I do all of that, I'm happy to, at the end, take questions about that. My talk, as such, is actually not about what we do in the studio directly. But as I talked with João, at the moment, it's quite popular. Actually, I wouldn't have to say it's still quite popular to talk about design thinking as something that companies find attractive and interesting, and that they want to bring into their innovation work. And that started roughly around the 2000s with IDEO proposing it, Stanford creating the so-called D School, which is actually not even a school, it's actually just a center at Stanford University. Then they got a lot of support by a man called Hasso Plattner, who is one of the founders of SAP, the German software company, and he said, I will donate. He's a billionaire, so he said, I will donate a good amount of money to Stanford to grow design thinking. And he said, I have this vision that everybody somehow should be exposed to this because it's such a different and interesting way of working. And then, because he also happens to own an IT university in Germany, he said, let's place also into Europe a school of design thinking. And so it's the Hasso Plattner Institute School of Design Thinking in Germany, which is open to everybody, and not only to people who are able to afford Stanford. And so it has taken its ripples. And nowadays you can say it is quite common in business schools, particularly, that students will have one design thinking course and are being introduced to this method in some sense. That is very interesting in the sense that, because it as a process, it works against some of the most basic instincts of management. In some sense, it says please leap before you look. Don't plan too much. Just go and learn as you do. So it is working against some of the things. To plan well, do all your projections. Know exactly what you want to reach exactly before you even go and march out, which you need in companies in order to get the legitimacy to actually get the financing for your projects. I mean, imagine you would hold stocks of a company, and you would talk to, at the annual meeting, you would talk to the C-suites or the CEO and the other people, and you would ask them, okay, what are we going to do next year with our company where our money is in? And they say like, oh, we don't really know yet. We're kind of just going to see and do a couple of things, throw them to the wall and see what sticks, and then we're going to find out what we're going to do with it. You probably would sell your shares relatively quickly and just say like, I'm going to go to some other place who gives me a little bit more planning security. So there's something interesting. At the same time, businesses have around the globe taken up design thinking and trying to somehow bring it into the usual work of a business. At the same time, however, one has to say that design thinking not necessarily has very much to do with the designers itself. If you have a design thinking team, you would probably have a heterogeneous team of people with different backgrounds. You would have people from, let's say, somebody from finance. You would have somebody who is a linguist. You would have somebody who's maybe a psychologist. You maybe have somebody from tech. They would work together. In many design thinking teams, there's not a single designer there. That is, on the one hand, something which worries designers because they say, like, well, wait a second, we should have a word to say about what design thinking is. On the other hand, it is probably also one of the reasons in which way design thinking has been such a democratized design. It's something that you do not have to have a specialized education to, but in a group together, you can actually use it for your own benefit. And that's what I want to talk about. Like, there's two relationships. There's two streams. The one is design thinking, to which I will come at the end of my talk, actually, and the way that designers actually, design-led means where do we actually able to use designers in businesses for their very specific competences? Because these two sides don't really understand each other. The guys who says, like, let's work with designers, they don't like design thinking. The head of the professional design organization, so the organization representing designers towards government and and other institutions, once said, what is really worrying is that probably designers are not the best members in a design thinking team. And I've heard that several times, and people are like, nah, that's not really where I want to be, I don't want to work. But what is the value they create? So design, let's take it broadly. Design thinking is something we know a lot about, but I'd like to show you a bit more about where it comes to. And what I'd like you to take away from this talk particularly, I will not be able to explain design into all details, and practice it is the best way of really learning it, but to say, why do companies and even government organizations pick it up and want to work with it? That, I hope, we will come out here today. And so there's the idea that innovation helps you to grow your company. And if you ask CEOs around the world, they would usually say, like, what we would like to have is a constant stream of innovations to come out, to create value, hopefully breakthrough, hopefully disruptive, and that they would basically be able to manage such a process quite functionally. Drucker, at his time when he wrote about innovation, he said, like, he was a man of forecasts. So his forecast was that innovation will soon be like any other function of the organization, of a business. It will just be run like finance or accounting or operations or logistics. We will find out what are the minute details of doing it, then we will be able to standardize it, and then we will have a company that's able to produce one innovation after the other. Thing is, he wrote that more than 30 years ago. We still haven't seen that happen in that way until today. At the same time, reasons often being, oops, so this one jumps. Reasons often being that if we look at companies, let's see if we have a, no, that was not it, sorry. to learn my tool here. Okay, let's do without the laser pointer. What we often see is that the very structure of companies is different. That means, you know, senior managers face a strong incentives to have short-term, to kind of like come out like, okay, what works? To work for safety. And they often find out that it's very difficult to manage the uncertainty inherent in the innovation process. Because think about one very simple thing. You do not need an innovation project if you already know what the outcome will be, right? You would just go and do it. You wouldn't have to call anybody in. You wouldn't have to kind of get people who are comfortable with the process. You would just go and do it. You would make a normal project. But the fact of innovation projects is that you don't know what will come out of it and that you fail. You make a lot of mistakes along the way. You have to learn. I will ask you one very simple thing. You have probably, several of you have Apple devices, one or the other. And so there's one thing that is very, very interesting about Apple. That is, they are very, very secretive about the innovation process, right? So particularly at the times of the late Steve Jobs, they would basically have very secretive, lots of noise in the internet, and then there would be a guy in jeans standing up on stage with a turtleneck pullover telling you this is the future of technology, so welcome it now. Why is this process so secretive? Well, so the other people can't copy it, you know, because they have this high technology in there. That's all very well and good. I tell you another reason why such a process needs to be extremely secretive. Because they fail, and they fail, and they fail, and they get it wrong, and they do use the wrong material, and the whole thing goes probably up in flames a couple of times before they finally find something that is valuable enough to produce and to show to somebody. That's the truth of innovation processes. And management has trouble to do this. Usually, we talk about the second chance. We talk about somebody who can try to produce something again, but to do that over and over. Having said that, we have a number of companies who are actually regarded as being able to constantly innovate and also do so, and particularly with design. The first one we talked about, Procter & Gamble has basically tried to bring design thinking into all of its functions. Procter & Gamble went from a very hierarchical organization, very efficiency and effectiveness driven, to one which tried to embrace innovation, and particularly as a design-driven innovation, or design-led innovation, broadly. IBM is a quite interesting case now. It is, as we speak today, the largest design company on this planet. They have hired so many designers. Originally, they had about 5 designers per 100 engineers. Now they want to have 20 designers per 100 engineers. So they had to hire a lot of designers. They now employ around 1,000 designers. There's no other company that has that many designers, educated designers signed up. Why? Because after their near-death experience in the early 90s, they decided to move from a product company to a service company. And they say in order to address the issues that world cities and regions and companies are dealing with today, they need to integrate design with technology. They still patent a lot. I recently talked to somebody. They still patent a lot, but what they basically do is we develop a lot, we patent it, but we do not sell it. We actually put it out for somebody else to license it. They become successful with producing it, probably somewhere in China or somewhere else, and then we deliver service on top of that technology. To integrate the technology and the service, they use designers. BMW does it very similar. So let's talk a little bit about characteristics. So if that is a business model that these companies actually actively strive for, what is it that makes this interesting? And that is in the first hand that if you think the old industrial logic is that let's produce something, a product hopefully, let's shrink wrap it, and it's like, package it, and let's send millions of them out and just see that we come, do small little, changes to it over time. Now, if you work design-led, you actually, and that would be for IBM, as much as for the other companies. You're trying to constantly create difference, not trying to produce the same over and over. Apple does that too. I'm talking about the innovation function that, as well. And to say like, let's create something that is by some measure of, different and valuable for producers. And then you get something which is a margin game. Why does Apple make so much money? Because they sell a lot. But the truth is, they make so much money because they have a tremendous margin on their devices. Apparently, there's a lot of people on this planet who are willing to pay extra much money, not because it is pretty good tech, it might be actually, but because it has a particular look and touch and feel and brand that comes with it, which actually lives through the design that it is. And that is what they build in. And there, every device that they come has to somehow be reminiscent of what was there before, and yet kind of like take on and feel natural. The chief designer of Apple says, it has to feel like you've always had it already in your hand. Then it is a product of a quality that feels intuitive. That's what they work on in terms of design. So how does this then work if we look at it as a business model? That's what we're working at the moment. There's two ways, basically. You can say in the old industrial way, can we arrange processes so that one outcome is always the same as the other? Yes, you can. It's called McDonald's. So you're trying to kind of like put out the McDonald's, the Big Mac index. It's the same product almost everywhere in the world. So you can say like, you can compare economic price ranges. Another way of working with it is actually that you say, can we actually create valuable inconsistency, surprises, the unusual, that people actually would be willing to pay for, be unpredictable in some way. And what you're getting is the following. Historically, in the industrial age, you would have a distribution between tangible and intangible value that looks like this. Remember commercials from your childhood? They usually said, this is a washing powder, it really washes your stuff white. That's function, right? That's what it does. Today, people don't try to sell washing powder like that anymore. They kind of try to, sell you also the intangible, the meaningful. Why am I having this product in my life? What does this product that I have, that I wear, that I have in my hand, what does it say about me? How does it put my identity out? And so you're having to, what most industrial companies notice at the moment is that the tangible and functional is usually actually quite, how to say that, it's reached. If I spend $3 more million in development, I will probably actually not come to a very much more functional product. If I make washing powder, making stuff even more white, people will hardly notice it anymore. I mean, you have to be super perceptible to see like, oh yeah, that's whiter than the other one. I mean, the other one was already good. So what you're actually having is that they say like, we can't do very much. Imagine a tea kettle. Would you care if your tea kettle boils your water 2 or 3 seconds faster? Probably that wouldn't be the reason to buy it, right? I'll give you an example in a minute about why you could buy it. What is this intangible, meaningful value that comes in it? And so with this, when you actually are trying to produce this intangible value, then we are in design. That is where design lives. That is where design thinking works to. That's what design works to. Creating this intangible value that creates products so that they feel natural for you and that you probably want to have them as part of your life. What that comes with that is that you're actually having processes which are much less calculable. You do not know, and a designer will never be able to tell you in advance what that product will feel like at the end of the day. You have to let that person do his or her job. Then you will finally come in. These people are trained to come up with something, so they will usually do. Very interestingly, do most of you know the Philip Stark Alessi orange juice squeezer? This thing that looks like a little spider, and it doesn't really work very well, but it's very expensive. Most people use it as kitchen art. Do you know what the design brief for that was? It was a silver tray. So then Philip Stark came away after 1 year and said like, I'm sorry, Alessi, I tried to make a tray, but I came up with an orange squeezer. How about that? He said, okay, we take that. Fantastic. If he would have said like, no, give me a tray, it would have been the end of that project, and Philip Stark would not have worked for them again. And so that's where, surprise comes into the process. You would have to be willing to accept that you tell somebody to do something and they come back with something completely else, and you say, well, that's valuably different. Let's do that. They have made a lot of money on that juicer, by the way. Oopsie, sorry. So what you're having then is like almost an obsession by people, with making products which are delivering experiences, and experiences in a very, very fine way. Now, how does a design process then work? Why is it so difficult for managers to hold it? Because design processes, and this is very common rendering, they look like this. They don't kind of like start and end on the other side. There's something which we call the fuzzy front end. Other people call it the giant hairball. It's just kind of like you don't know if you're actually moving forward or backwards. You talk to people and say like, what have you achieved this week? And they say, we've learned a lot. Okay, you don't get a bonus for learning a lot. You're getting a bonus for doing something. And what about next week? We might learn a little more. That means going backwards. Yes. We did a lot of things and we figured out it doesn't work. That usually doesn't get you anywhere, does it? It does for these people. It moves forward. Until then, it clarifies to where it leads. Which means, process-wise, management has easier with this. This is the waterfall project, waterfall process model. One step after the other, neatly staged, and you come to a product that you already know. The interesting thing with it is you get the product you wanted, which is great. And you probably have based it on market research. But it's probably not the product that's going to surprise the market. It's not going to be the product that feels like, oh, wow. What then design uses is an iterative process. You do something, you throw it at the wall, you find something, and then you do it over and over and over again. And every time you do it, you improve it a little bit more. And as you are iteratively going over it, you are suddenly learning something about the product. You're becoming so endeared and close to it that you are able to, in then expanding cycles, develop it ever further. So that's the iterative process, which then means we actually do not plan very much. So the imperative of planning is unhinged. You give people a budget, you tell them what you want from them, roughly, you give them a brief, you say like, I would like to have a metal tray, or something else we can sell. And then they kind of like, they disappear into the dark room, and then, I don't know, and the symbol for design thinking has become that like a lot of Post-it notes are flying around and covering 1,000 walls and something like that. So something's happening. If you go and stick your head in as a manager, you just go, oh my God, I have no idea. You talk to people, they have no idea either. Then it's kind of like it's being put forward in some sense until they, in the end, move forward. Interestingly, as chaotic as this process often seems to be, and as uncontrollable it seems to be to create this surprising but valuable difference, people working in it are extremely precise to end on a predefined time. I give you an analogy to that. Theater productions, right? The director has, all the actors in. We don't know exactly, we have to play Hamlet. Hamlet has been played 200,000 times in the last 5 years alone. Now we have to make it new. Good luck. And so you come up with something. You have a day when you will have dress rehearsal. You know that you have the opening night. The date is already fixed. So they will work to have something for you on the predefined date. And if you have good people, if you have good ideas, they will come up with something good. Design thinking, design like anything else, is a trash in, trash out process. If you don't put anything interesting, if you don't put talent in, if you don't put interesting connections in, what comes out is usually not very interesting. If you put value in, you have a much better chance to actually land somewhere else. If they would have given me the brief about the silver tray, I don't think I would have come up with something very interesting. Probably I'm not Philip Stark, I'm probably not a designer for such products. So it's not like everybody can, but it depends on how it's built up. That's where management comes in again. So that means you're open to accident, and you develop a very different feeling about failure. Failure is something, if you ask designer, what do you think about failure? They say about what? What do you mean? They don't say like, we love it. They just don't really accept the word failure. They said like, we learned a lot. We have tried, and now we're gonna go into the next iteration of it. And accidents are actually welcome. Usually, businesses are completely built to avoid accidents. Accidents, I don't mean like somebody falling down the stairs and breaking a leg. That's an accident. I mean, you know, somebody trying something and it doesn't work out. But you learn something else. And there's a long history of products in this world who are created out of accidents. We have Fleming and the penicillin, obviously. You know, there's a couple of stories that all of you know that, and there's an idea of actually inviting such surprises into it. So what does it mean in terms like, okay, how do we then, if that's valuable for us, let me look at the time. We're actually doing fine. If this is valuable to us, then the question is, how do we produce it? Because, you see, business schools do not care about things that you can't do anything about. That's just one of the matter. You know, we are there to educate and to train people in being able to tackle difficult, pernicious problems because you can do something about it. If there's anything that you can't do anything about it, business schools usually say, poof, that's not our topic. You know, that's for the weather guys. And so that's basically where, if we take something into a business school, we want to work with it, then we want to have the feeling that we can do something about it. And this is basically where we say, like, you know, so design thinking design does not necessarily belong into the internal part of the company, but it becomes the element where company says, okay, this is interesting. Okay, we have a very tough competition. With however much money we pour into this, we will probably not come up with the functionally better product. But if we use design, we maybe can come up to the product that sells nevertheless, because people are buying it. And there's a huge range of products where you actually say, like, that's not the best product you possibly could have functionally, but it won the market race because people are endeared to it more than to others. So what can you do about it? How can you create a company that you build the capabilities and competences, develop a culture and an identity around these processes? And very important, how do you have performance indicators, right? Just give people money and money and money and hope that they come up with something is not a very good idea, not even for design. You wouldn't want to do that. That would be madness. And so you want to know, so they're working with processes which are not very linear, which are kind of like messy. But still, you would like to say, okay, at the entrance and at the exit of it, we will have performance indicators. And designers, against to what is sometimes attributed to them, are actually very, very okay with that. Recently, we did a study in fast fashion, H&M, Kappa, Zara, where designers have to come up with a new fashion line basically every month. And when we asked them about failure, we actually expected them to say, like, you know, yeah, we try a lot and sometimes it doesn't work out. They said, I know exactly if it has worked or if it hasn't worked, because we get immediate market feedback. We know if it's been selling, and if it's not, we will have to do something about it. So these designers in fast fashion, with extremely fast turnovers of their products, actually accept that the one thing that makes this business go round is the speed and the attractiveness of the goods to the market immediately. And 1 month later, it's gone, and then they have to create the new one. And so they actually take on business indicators for their work. What they still do and work with is, however, you know, design processes the way we just talked with it. So these are not contradiction in itself. But the question is, how do you elegantly fit them to one another so that designers are willing to contribute to the company, which is often sometimes also the way that they use to bring out their products, and the companies are able to actually account for the way that designers are managed, which sometimes can be quite a bit different. And then to formulate a strategy. Now, we have a lot of innovation strategies. It's not the first innovation strategy that you would form. But one way of working with design generally is to include it into an innovation strategy. I think, however, in this world, innovation strategies are more often written than actually necessarily tightly followed. And having said that, if you would like to develop design as a part, it's important to know something about it. But let me firstly say a little bit about innovation strategies. We have the ad hoc strategies. That means we are opening for experiments. Something might come out of it. If we find something valuable, we bring it to the market. Another one is a bit more focused than the first one, is the supplier-driven strategy. That means if we get a new technology in, if our suppliers can, come to us with interesting products that or solutions that we can integrate into our products or services, then we will innovate with that. The next one is market-driven strategy. You know all of that. We use market research to see what the market wants. Then we produce that, and then we send it out. With the, the beauty of it is that it does provide us with data. Even, you think about some of the greatest blunders in our economic history. Let's just take one, which is a bit old, but New Coke. So the executives of Coca-Cola, selling everywhere in the world, came up to the idea that the old Coke wasn't good enough anymore. And so they had all of their brewmasters, I suppose, come up with a new Coke. I don't know if they burned the old recipe, which is supposedly somewhere in Atlanta in a little safe somewhere hidden, but they said, like, we're going to have a new Coke. A new taste is necessary because they had lost the challenge with Pepsi very often. So they sent out thousands of marketeers, and they sent out, did thousands of focus groups trying to find out what this taste could be. They put all the effort into it, did all the analysis. There was evidence that the market would accept a new Coke, that there would be no problem with it. So they said, let's go ahead. They produced the new Coke. They shipped it into every store on this planet basically on the same day, and it was a gigantic flop. People didn't want it. They wanted to have the old Coke. So, oops, 2 weeks later, sorry, we created the old, old Coke is back. Here it is. I don't know if they fired the marketeers, but for sure it was a billion-dollar blunder of a company. And still, it was very much based on objective data regarding the need for change, something inherent in the basic product that they have been selling for a long time. Let's look a little bit more. Oops, this is very sensitive. I have to be careful. There's the R&D driven strategy. We know that very well. Procter & Gamble would have that. Once you get your little plastic, see-through bag with one liquid on the one side and a little powder on the other. Those ones that I'm speaking about from, what is it? The brand, at the moment, explains to me. And so I talked to the guys who've developed it and says it took ages to get it to that part. But they wanted to have something that somehow is transparent, with liquid on the one side, on the other. And you just throw it in, and the plastic somehow dissolves in hot water. And what is it? No, it's not carbonated. It's a dishwasher tap, and so that was very R&D driven. They needed to have the right material. They needed to kind of like put it together. They tested it. They washed all the dishes they could find in Cincinnati, and then they were kind of happy and said, like, okay, let's send that out. R&D driven strategy, obviously very, very strong in pharmaceuticals. You have to have that. A good friend of mine, he's the innovation officer in a Copenhagen-based pharmaceutical startup company. Startup is quite funny. They have existed for 15 years and they have burned $300 or $400 million, and they have already one product. Amazing. That kind of puts them ahead of the rest of the crowd. And so with them, everything is research. Without research, without producing the right data, governments will not accept the drugs that they have. They will not be able to bring them to the market. R&D is also very much in cars, so the good old industrial model is very, very R&D driven. Then we have two other strategies which I would like to outline a little bit in detail, each one of them. There's the design-driven strategy, which is actually having the following idea, that the executive, so the C-suite, is actually design savvy and is having a strong interest in trying to develop their brands and their products with the help of designers, but for themselves know and keep in their head how they will do that, what kind of interpreters were. The great example for that is still Steve Jobs, which has often been mentioned, somebody who cares deeply about the product. He was probably not the best programmer, nor was he the best software or hardware engineer, but he had a particular idea about what it should sound like, what it should be like, and he had a vast network of people beyond computers even that would help him to somehow make some of those decisions. So it's an executive position, and how would we work with designers to be able to achieve an advantageous competitive position with the help of design? And then we have design thinking, which is a much more of a broad approach, where, how to say that? Design thinking is something that the top brass usually has to say yes to so that other people can do it. What Procter & Gamble, for example, did is they introduced several of their top managers to design thinking, not because they wanted them to come up with something new, which they didn't, but actually just for them to say, oh, now we know what that is, so you can try that out on our people down the line, that's okay. So they had to be kind of introduced because they didn't want to go down the corridor and some kind of like, extremely excited person jumps at them and says like, oh, I love this design thinking. They go, oh, good for you. I wish I would know what that is. And so, it is basically very much something which often is located in innovation centers or areas of companies. For example, Volkswagen, the car manufacturer, has created a service innovation center in an not abandoned, but in a former building of the Auto University. That's where they play around, that's where they work. Deutsche Bank has an innovation team, you won't believe it, but they do. If you have ever been a private customer with Deutsche Bank, you wouldn't believe it, believe me. And, but they have basically found out that they need to do something in terms of customer service, not to just the big customers, but also the smaller customers. So they developed a center around it. If you ever have been flying through Schiphol Airport, interestingly, they have a small design thinking team working on the Schiphol Airport experience. So not even how can I get fast from one gate to the other, but how can be walking from that gate be pleasant on the way to get to the other, So these are examples of some companies which have been particularly turning to design thinking to work on that, and who do not leave it to design consultancy to do it for them, but they actually have using their own employees to work on that. But I want to start with the design-driven strategy before I say a little bit about design thinking. So let's see. Most of it is built on this man, Roberto Verganti, a scholar from Politecnico di Milan, and he looked particularly at northern Italian design firms and wrote this book, Design-Driven Innovation. By now, it has been broadening a bit, but that is a little bit the start of it. And so, where he would start with it and understanding what it's like. So in order to understand why design is powerful and why we cannot let design into the hands of everybody, to some extent, we have to understand what it means. And so in Latin, designare means to give meaning to. So basically, and this comes from a linguist, design is making sense of things. Now, and then the other one here, John Heskett, another designer, said, make our environment in ways, without precedent in nature to serve our needs and give meaning to our lives. So what does that mean? If you ever have met 4 or 5 engineers who have come up with a new product, they usually stick it into a black box or into something else that looks pretty boring to everybody else but them. And they are very, very, very excited about the technology. They think like the most interesting thing here is the technology. And so I've worked with a number of teams like that too, in technology, but also in biotech and in others. Usually when you meet the engineer, and this is not disrespectful, I think there's very good reasons for this. Usually you say like, I got a molecule, let me write it for you on the board. And everybody else who is not happen to be good at chemistry or biology just goes, oh, wow, what can it do? We don't know yet, but it's great. Now, I'm going to write an article about it. And so that's all usually quite interesting. But so there's a function there. There's something that does something. But for it to be actually possible and to be integrated into our lives, somebody has to come along, that's usually today a designer, to make sure, how does it fit in? What do we have to put it into? How do we have to make it look and feel like so that it actually becomes natural? I'll give you an example how far that can go. This is not from a designer, but you all would quickly recognize it. It's Thomas Edison and electric light. So he comes up with a light bulb, fantastic. He didn't invent the light bulb, he just came up with one that burns longer. And at that time, all of New York, he also had backing by a couple, Morgan and other financiers. All of New York was lit by gas lights. Gas lights have an disadvantage. If you don't turn them off, your house might burn down. That's just pretty bad. So he said basically, okay guys, I have a great idea. Why don't we take electric light? And we put cables through the city and we put them into every house and we will have this nice light bulbs, and people didn't want to have that. And he said, like, but that's much better. Why don't you want to have it? And they said, like, I don't know. We don't understand it. It somehow seems strange. By that time, gas was produced by large plants outside of New York City and then pumped in underground pipes into the city, distributed into every household. So it's basically kind of like a bomb. And so he came up to the following idea. He said, for example, I have a light bulb. It's 3 times as bright as gas lights. Would you want it? And people said, like, no, we kind of like the gas lamps. It's kind of fun. And he said, God, so what did he do? He made an incandescent light bulb that was just as bright as a gas light. So he made it 3 times less powerful than he actually was able to do it. Then he said, like, okay, they don't want to have wires hanging over the street, electric wires. So what we have to do? We got to put them into the ground. So he had them bigger. Now, we're talking about the time before insulation. So you know how much electricity they must have lost on the way, actually on it, just going into the ground. And then he said, like, we will actually go through the former pipes of the gas works. And so in the end, people were actually having lights at the same spots as before, just as bright as before, but just your house wouldn't burn down. That was enough. And once he had achieved that, people really wanted it. And said, like, oh, that's great, that's fantastic, it fits into our lights. And after some time, he said, maybe we can do it a little bit brighter now. Yeah, okay, that's fine, great, now we have it. And so that is the point in which, how can you make a new technology that you might be completely excited about, make it adaptable for people's lives, which is usually on the basis of things they already know. And then you don't have to make it 5 times better in every way. Usually it's this one way, one point that is enough to make it better, to make it fit better to people's life. And that is what design basically is. That's the idea of making a mobile, a handheld device that fits into your palm, because that's where people want to have it. If it's too big, it feels strange. So to create, and then with everything that people accept, you build on that to create more and more usability. And that is usually what designers are said to be good at. So here we have the tea kettle that I mentioned before. It's from Alessi. It's one of the primaries. So this tea kettle actually cooks your water slower than most Chinese-made off the row and much cheaper tea kettles. This tea kettle is really expensive still, if you want it today. It grew out of a design competition that they ran. And the man who made it was actually an architect, interestingly, not a product designer, but he said, like, okay, I can make a kettle too. And so, he came up with this thing. And so it costs, if you compare it to another tea kettle that might also be metal from somewhere else, it cooks your water fine, it's okay, but it doesn't necessarily outdo the other ones. Its functionality is not higher, but it costs about 4 times as much. Why? Because it has a little bird at the front. And when it peeps, people go, oh, look, the bird is singing. And so this is an absolute bestseller from Alessi. An absolute thing. People have been buying this like crazy. And it's interestingly, the usual tea kettle comes to the market, it sells a couple of years and goes out. This turns into a design classic, which is sold again and again and then again. And when it almost fades, they put it up again. It's just like a Volkswagen Beetle, if you remember. It runs and runs and runs, and people are buying and buying and buying it until Volkswagen has said, it's enough now. We stop the production. You don't get any more Beetles. We give you a new Beetle now, which was a little bit like New Coke. It doesn't really work that well. And so this is the idea behind it. This is the extra margin. This is the surprise. This is the thing of a product that fits into your life just a little bit better and somehow provides a particular meaning around it, a feel and touch that you like to be identified with. If people come into your kitchen and they see the Philip Stark orange juice squeezer and this kettle, it will say something about you. If you're not design savvy or unsavvy, I leave that to the ear and to whoever visits you, but it tells something about you. And that is what the designers try to produce, something that kind of like comes to you. Here's other products from the same range. Here's quite interestingly, this is Artemide. They made this lamp, and they didn't make any consumer research. They didn't ask anybody, hello, would you like to have a lamp that you don't see and that kind of like produces moods? The answer would have been no. Because most people go to IKEA or to any other part on the world and they buy a lamp that other people are supposed to see. It's supposed to hang from your roofs. It's supposed to be there. People are going to, oh, there's a fantastic lamp. This is a lamp which is just, it has 3 little lights and you hide it behind your couch. And you turn it on and you can tell it romantic, relaxing, whatever. And then it produces those colors in your room without that you exactly know where these colors and this mood is coming from. It's a mood lamp. And so, they produced it and they said, we have no idea if anybody's going to buy this, but we have a good feeling that they actually might like this. And so they produced it and they offered it, and people actually did like it. Another thing is here, the bookshelf up there. This is not a great bookshelf. It reduces the functionality of a bookshelf by about 80%. But you get it. It's out of plastic. You have to bend it yourself. You put it to your wall, wherever you are, and you put your little books into, and if somebody comes, it looks a little bit like a sculpture. It has this thing together of sculpture and bookshelf. So it's like, it's called the bookworm, which you probably have seen it a little bit. And again, it says something about you. Your parents had a bookshelf. You have a bookworm, something like that. And the same is true for all of these products in some sense, that they are trying to provide an extra value, which somehow is different. If you would have told people before, hello, we're making a marketing research, would you like to have a bookshelf that you have to bend yourself, you have to nail it to the wall, and then you can only have 20% of your books in it? No. And here you have something which then suddenly produced and presented becomes a completely different thing. That is the surprising element, the surprising difference that these companies are trying to produce. So what is it? That means you have a split between function and sense. And what makes this split is the people, not customers, but people. People who have complete lives. And you have to speak to the lives of these people to make something. So you have a good function in technology, which is like, yes. You can't sell people washing powder that doesn't wash it and just make a nice design package. That doesn't work. They will not buy it, most likely. But you can make a washing powder that works quite well, and then you do something extra on it that actually kind of like lives in the product and make people want to give it a bit of consideration and a part in their lives. And that's the way it actually talks to people. So this becomes then most interesting if you ask yourself, okay, can we somehow combine new technology with this design set? The tea kettle was just a function-wise finished product that you just make nice. The bookshelf too. There's no new technology here, right? It's different than the iPhone when it was produced in the first time. It was quite revolutionary technology. The same is true for the Nintendo Wii. Previously, before that, people were playing computer games like this, like in the computer game player. And they don't see anything, and it's quite, they only meet on the screen. Now suddenly you have a device in your hand that makes you jump through the room, and watch out for your vases and your furniture. And you actually can interact with people as you play together with them. That's a shift from the action in the screen to action also in the room, to a different way of interacting. That was possible because somebody built into the device a particular tracking, which is now basically in very many devices, something that knows where the device is and how fast it is being moved. That's what you need to be able to do that. And interestingly, the people who produced the technology, it was not Nintendo who produced that technology. The people who produced the technology were not stupid. They didn't go to the third best company first to sell them the product. I mean, would you do that? You have the killer application and you go to the third best company, the one with the slowest device and computing power? No, you go to the best. So they first went to the PlayStation and they're like, hello, we have this, do you want it? No, our people played like this. They don't run through the room. And they say like, let's go to Microsoft, Xbox. How about you? Would you like it? No, I'm sorry, we don't really think that it's gonna work. And so they go to the desperate one, Nintendo, on the way of falling off the market. The slower machine, the worse graphics, and they say, yes, we take it. That's great. Building it into their machine and letting, this is a bit outdated, you have the Xbox Connect and so on, I know it, but this was kind of like the story behind it. People discovered suddenly, okay, and the Nintendo Wii, at the time it came to the market, had worse computing power, worse graphics, and less games than all of the other consoles. So it was actually not a very good one, apart from this one integration of play tennis, which was an old game anyway. So what you have here is then, you have the possibility of incremental and adaptation to the social cultural reality. You have possibility of improving functionality towards a technological push. And then, and this is Roberto Vaganti's argument, you can also ask, can we suggest a new meaning with it? And that's where you have the design push. And so the interesting part then, obviously, in the upper right-hand corner, where you have a new technology that is being, through design, made adaptable for the larger amount of people. So usually, historically, technology had to move like that. First, you had the people who understood the technology, and they didn't care if it was in a little ugly black box because they knew the technology. Then it moves from there into corporate applications, people who don't care very much about the box either, they care about the functionality. And then somewhere along the line, it comes to consumers. And then it has to move away from the black box, and design can do its part. So this is an attempt to move this last step of the line of technological development and put it first and say, let's do this at the very beginning of our product, and let's through this. It's a reaction to market speed. If speed is crucial to come to the market, if you need to penetrate the market quickly, because otherwise you have a lot of other people who are able to create the same technology with a little patent twist. It's not that difficult. You can't even sue them for it. And to create the same or even more powerful technology, because they are even having deeper pockets than you, then you need to have something at the very beginning of your new technology that can make the difference. Now let's be fair and frank. If you look at Apple products today, right, and you have the difference from the iPhone 5 to the iPhone 6, so oh my God, we made it a little bit bigger because Samsung has bigger devices and they're losing customers to Samsung. That is not radical anymore in any part, shape, or form. So for most of Apple products, they are in a market pull situation now at the moment. They have competitors. These devices, they hold for a time, these attractiveness. It's not going to be forever. Others will react to it. But then the aim would be always to see like, okay, can we come sometimes in the upper right-hand corner? And for companies who are very much not able to have higher functionality, but are working in an industry with not so attractive products, they always can go in the lower quadrant to the right. And this way, I personally like this as a strategy matrix quite a bit. Let's not do this here. Because you have particular values out of profits, assets, cost of investment, unique value, product longevity, which actually matter a lot to businesses. So the outcome of such a strategy are clear business values. Selling it, making money today, but also assets, the ability to be able to also in the next product draw on design early. And there's challenges with it, because if you get it wrong, you get nowhere. You're not really moving safe. And that's why large companies sometimes say, like, let somebody else be first. And then let them do it, and then we buy them. And that works sometimes very well, and sometimes it didn't work well. There's this bad merger of Time Warner and AOL, becoming Time Warner AOL as a big merger. Usually Time Warner 10 years earlier would have just bought AOL. But AOL, due to, it was internet subscription service, 90s, my goodness, so long time ago. And so what AOL did, it was sucking itself full with market capital, with investment, that Time Warner, when it wanted to enter the subscription internet market, could not do so anymore, because IOL was too big and it was too expensive. So they actually had to go there and go like, how about a merger? Which was the worst thing they've ever done. I mean, both companies have disappeared pretty much since then because it didn't fit. And so you are working at the borderline, which can be necessary and important. One would have to see like, what does your industry look like? What do you need in some parts? Let me see. So it's to draw on the, this is I think a very important part here. We have to draw on the, running out of time. We have to draw on the cultural sphere, what makes people live as people, what furnishes their life, what is natural to them, what is feels intuitive to them, and the technological sphere at once. I like to give, these are two examples from Denmark, how this can work for an entrepreneurial company, and I just want to talk about the left one here, which I find is very interesting. If those ones they're not coffee pots, they're actually loudspeakers, wireless loudspeakers from Libratone loudspeakers. So what they did is the following. There's a couple of people with a little bit of money on their hands, not very much, and they said, like, we want to produce a loudspeaker, which is probably the worst idea on the planet. You know, that means you immediately have people who are competing with you, who have much more money than you, who have all the access to the market, and you have nothing of that. So they did the following. They said, like, okay, we will work with what people find interesting. This is a bit of sleek Scandinavian design about it. You know, you can see that. And we will make a product that only works with Apple products. Only. They will be wirelessly connected to every Apple product, and they're going to be beautiful. So that they created, they got a couple of design awards for it being a nice one. And then Apple knocked on their door and said, like, we like your product. Oh, that's nice. They're made in China. We like your product. We would actually like to take it into our Apple store, the online Apple store. Wow. Now you suddenly have done a fantastic feature. By the attractiveness of your product, you have actually been able to piggyback on one of the largest distribution networks you can possibly get into. And by that, bypassed all of the other troubles that you have. Since that worked so well, they came up with a couple of similar products, which are now also work with other products than just Apple. But this was the step into it. They looked into, like, let's make something that designally looks as if Apple would have produced it. And then, through that, actually gain the credibility. These III loudspeakers here that you see is loudspeakers, headphones, is, I know it's a strange name, right? Wouldn't work here, but that's what they are. III. Beats me, but okay. They developed this one here. They said, like, okay, let's go and study DJ culture. DJ culture, because most people have great, you know, I don't know, headphones and all of that, but everybody wants to be dark in here and a DJ sometimes. They looked into the culture and they developed this one with the help of DJs, doing an anthropological study of what DJs like, what they find interesting, what is work. Apparently DJs don't care very much about colors and logotypes and other things like that. But these are not the best headphones that you can get. Bose and others make much better ones with much better noise reduction. But they have this cultural thing. And that is a startup company that made those ones. And that, again, it got them out of the place where you don't want to be, with all of the other guys, where, you know, selling is really, really tough. But let me go now quickly to design thinking, which is quite different. This was now the first strategy. First strategy is, let's work with designers, let's work on the cultural sphere. Design thinking is not very different, with one exception. It does not need to have designers on it. It says we all are instruments of humanity. We all are human beings, so we have a basic understanding of what that could be. We can understand it. We all are experts in different areas. And so if we could pool a number of experts, heterogeneous experts together to work on something and to go out and do a design anthropology, study how people kind of like, you know, work and live and what they do, and bring that back and work on it, you would probably get a human-centered approach to making a product. You redevelop it in some sense. So you're working human-centered. That's the first element. That means you're not asking, for example, usual market research is very much obsessed by the mean or the median. You say, like, what does the average producer want? Here, you would go out and you would deliberately look at the extreme users who do things that you usually do not want. And you ask yourself, how could we use these practices to inform what the average user actually does? You're not serving the average user by giving them what they want, but you look at the extremes to come up with different ideas. You go, as I said before, now you know that you've already, hopefully from the very beginning of the talk, that you've learned of this, rapid iterations, fail early and often, leverage early information, bring in technology from very many different backgrounds, and you will always have a minimal gain at the end if you run through a design thinking process. I'll give you an example of that, how that can work. I'll give you a couple of examples, and then I want to stop because I cannot go on about design thinking itself, but it doesn't really help us here. This is Mattel. Mattel actually said, let's do design thinking workshops to come up with something else than Barbie dolls. And actually, the outcome of this was Polly Pocket. And I've met the father of Polly Pocket, who was part of this. I mean, I don't know, he ran the project. And he was always, you should buy Polly Pocket for your daughter. She will play with it longer than with Barbie dolls. As a matter of fact, my daughter, 7 years old, has stopped playing with Polly Pocket and Barbie dolls. So it wasn't that successful. Okay, we take 12 employees with various skill sets and backgrounds from all levels of experience within the company. We give them the task of conceiving and developing a completely new brand for Mattel. We put them in the separate building with 2,000 square foot that looks like a playground, basically. The desk on wheels, there's lots of toys and materials, they can do whatever they we do this for 3 months, that they leave their jobs, which is expensive, 3 months, right? I mean, they've scaled that down later. Leave their jobs and the titles behind. That means if there's somebody who has a higher hierarchical position in that space, no more. Everybody speaks equal. There's no hierarchy within such a design thinking space. And they take part in this experiment. And so they worked with this for a while. They said, can we have our people develop new brands? Then they moved that over to actually the Clay Street project, which is Procter & Gamble, and was this guy up there, David Kühler, who he developed that because Procter & Gamble wanted to have the same. They said, we need to have different branding issues. We have branding issues with some of our products, and we need to come behind how we can reinvigorate some of our brands. And so they also have the playground environment. This is a former brewery in Cincinnati, which they converted. They went about 12 weeks with people that they wanted to have to work on. And they reconceived Ariel, for example, and Pampers diapers. They came up with a little twist to Pampers diapers. Pampers diapers is actually, you wouldn't believe it, one of the largest divisions of Procter & Gamble. We're talking a extremely large market share here. And so the same here in the sense, bringing people together to work on following a design brief and to come up with in a human-centered way with a new solution to it. Let me see if I have. If you give me 1 minute, I will tell you what they did with Pampers, which I think is, I don't know how many of you are parents, but okay. Okay, so Pampers, Procter & Gamble introduced the disposable diaper. Before that, you had to wash diapers. Disposable diapers comes in, 100% market share, great technological, solution. Over the years, it goes down. They lose market share all the time to no-name brands, to other brands, and they asked themselves, what can we do? And so as a good company, they said, let's do market research, finding out, bringing in new approaches to it. Then they said, let's make the diapers better, technological, functional way. So I don't know if you remember the commercials. They always have look, the new diaper, here's some blue liquid. All of it in, fantastic. And just, how likely is a baby to make that much? But okay. And so it was just look, we kind of use Teflon fiber from space travel. It's fantastic. And none of that worked. None of that worked. And so the group that went into this space, they went out to talk to mothers. And actually found out that mothers really don't care about diapers. The baby's supposed to be dry. If it is, fine, fantastic. Because nobody comes over to you and says oh, you're using Pampers. No, nobody ever does that. But what they found out, and that is the more interesting part, is that usually mothers are very interesting, and everybody goes, oh, can I touch your belly? Until they have given birth. After that, everybody wants to touch the baby, and the mother usually doesn't get that much attention anymore. And so they, that's what they found out. I don't know if it's true. I'm not a mother, but maybe some of you can tell me. And so they said, okay, let's make this different. We need to make a diaper that makes mothers look good. Because then that's going to be the reason why they buy it. And so they came up with, after 12 weeks in this, they came up with one change. Their tagline was Pampers, everything for the baby, and they changed it to Pampers, everything for my baby. It was a laughing stock of the company. They said, like, it took 12 weeks to change one word. I mean, come on, guys, you know? But then they handed this project over to the engineers, and the engineers said, like, that's kind of interesting. So how about, you know, pull-down diapers, which look like potty training, or like crawlies, or, you know, all of these. So they changed the diapers to actually allow different things that baby do. So the baby crawls rather fast. People say, like, oh, good genes, fantastic baby, you know, and the mother says, yes, I know. And so that is somehow, that's a little change, a very tiny change that brings suddenly my baby, the mother, into the picture as somebody who that produces. And that picked up the sales quite a bit. Sometimes it's these small little things. And that's the human-centered aspect. Market researchers are like, what else do you want on your diapers? You know, more light? Or liquid, what else? You know, people can't answer that. They would never come up with the ideas like, I want to have a diaper that makes me look good. They would just not ask for that. That is, you know, this human-centered approach that is with it. Since then, design thinking has moved quite a bit. It has been used, Procter & Gamble, I just talked about it. In Denmark, 3 ministries have a design agency themselves. The Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Taxation previously, the Ministry of what is it? Education. They give design projects to their own team. These people are public employees. They are working in a space in between the design, the ministries, and they have to reconceive the way that the relationship of services to citizens is. So they ask, how can we make our services more, usually would say citizen-friendly, but I said more engaging. People in Denmark pay a lot of tax. So they also would like to have very, very nice services that come with it. So the question, like, how can government services become more human-centered? Clean tech clusters, cooperations, where people actually use design thinking to come up with new clean tech versions, not necessarily to find out something new, but to actually be able to collaborate across companies. SAP uses design thinking very much in terms of the agile software development. It's a little bit like Scrum. So what they basically say, like, we can't produce software anymore and then try to sell it. We have to produce software together with the people who are going to use it. And in order to do that, we have to make our software as human-centered and user-friendly and everything that they have. So we use this process. Kaiser Permanente is a hospital that changed work routines with it. One problem was always the handover of patients between nurses. And so at the end, they came up with a little routine, which was just that one nurse would go, 2 nurses together would go, you know, from every one shift from patient to patient and just hand over the patient. And the patient would be there and would know that he or she has just been handed over to the other nurse and who the other nurse is. Creates a lot less, you know, so who is on duty here? And it creates less nerves in some sense. Again, here, something which costs a little bit more, but actually creates a lot savings in the end, because the people feel like they are safe. I know who's the nurse on service. It's not just a change of guard somewhere out there in this glass box. It's people who come along with it. It's the same story over and over. When companies use design thinking, Schiphol Airport, Deutsche Bank, it is like, how can we make our services, our products more human-centric? That's the very basic part that I want to say. And I think with that, actually, we can, this is the process, design thinking process. Well, you can read all that up. I'm very happy if you have, there's lots of texts about it. If you just put design thinking into your search word, you come up with tons of stuff. And it all kind of like boils down to this: understand, observe, define, ideate, prototype, and test, which works under all the conditions that I mentioned. Iterative, so it's not like this, but like all the arrows, human-centered, trial and error, finding out, formulating, prototyping a lot, trying to do cheap versions of something before you make the expensive version. That's actually, I think, these things I cover. So to bring in design, either through designers or through design thinking into your companies, you have to see how do they fit? What are they going to deliver to you? The focus is usually on the process, on the products, on the services, and the idea of it, how can we make them more human-centered, more natural in it. That's the strong point. And in a time where high technological investments do not necessarily yield you very higher functionality, that becomes an extreme asset for your sales proposal to people. You can say like, look, buy mine, it's a little bit more expensive, and it's not functionally better, but it looks better in your house. And that in an experience economy, that is a very, very seductive message. That's why this works. In a nutshell. I could have told you that in the beginning, right? But now, okay. Well, thank you very much. I don't know if if you any questions or something, I would be very happy. But otherwise, I don't know. They said an hour, and I did an hour, 10 minutes. Noisa, what are we doing? Are we taking questions? Are there any questions? Yeah. Market research is extremely helpful. I think I would not want to recommend any company not to do market research. But if you're looking for something which is valuably different, you cannot go and ask the people. You can go and observe them, you can live with them, you can gather information about them, an anthropological study in some sense, and then to channel that into a technology and a product. For that, market research does not help you. It might actually tell you the opposite of what this product actually is. If you are aiming at that kind of innovation, yes. Now that's why I mean, like Apple, for example, has a lot of things where they do market research, and that's the market pull area. That's where they say like, okay, what kind of apps or what kind of things do we produce? And then they have another group which works on the next unusual. And it's two different things. The one is, the bread we know we have. That's the next button on the device. And the other one is, what is going to be tomorrow's business? Like, what's the thing we haven't conceived of yet? That's where the difference lies. So please, I do not want to have said that market research is it's greatly useful. The question when? Mm-hmm. Yes. Any more? If not, it's late. And I'm hungry because my stomach kicks in at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much for your time. You're welcome. Great.